Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today I'm going to carry on with the Polygyny series. This is Polygyny Part 2, where we are answering the question, why polygamy? Obviously, because there's such an onslaught on polygyny, and when I say polygyny, I often use it interchangeably, with the word polygamy, because polygamy was the original word that defined a man having more than one wife, and then later on they introduced other words like polygyny and polyandry, then using polygyny specifically to define a man marrying more than one wife or a man having more than one partner simultaneously, as opposed to polyandry, which is a woman having multiple spouses. So therefore I tend to often just interchange these words polygamy and polygyny, because most people still today know it as polygamy. So anyway, be that as it may, to recap the previous video, we said that marriage constitutes basically three things. The first one is the natural need for people to mate, meaning the natural attraction between male and female. That's a survival mechanism in order to propagate the species, but once a baby is created, it also has needs beyond the initial mating, and so there are emotional bonds are formed to help facilitate longevity in the relationship and mutual cooperation in raising the children that come from that relationship. And then lastly, it's propriety, and that is the male's propriety over the woman, which helps connect the father to the children. Okay, how that happens, etc. You can go and check the first video for more clarity on those issues. So the first thing I want to look at when we talk about polygyny is the nuts and bolts of things. That is, we want to talk about the biology of the man and the woman and how they are different. Okay, so because we have already ascertained that the primary instinct of sexual attraction between male and female is actually not for fun, okay, it's actually serves a biological function, and that is so that the woman can fall pregnant and the species can perpetuate. That being said, the possibility of one man impregnating several women exists. So, for example, if a man is with one particular woman and he impregnates her, she would bear the responsibility, obviously biologically, for carrying the child until she delivers the child. Up until the point that she delivers the child, sex is nothing but a bonding exercise, but it no longer serves a biological or significant biological function. It does still serve a biological function, other minor biological functions which I'm not going to get into, but it no longer serves a significant biological function. And so that is the time when, as is often the case, or in the case of infidelity, it usually happens during the period when the wife is pregnant, because the man then goes on to seek another mate. He doesn't obviously understand that that's what he's doing. Obviously, men just find themselves attracted to other women, and then some men just go with it and end up, on the opposite end of the legal spectrum in terms of marriage, and they don't kind of really know what's going on with themselves at that point, and that really is just a natural instinct to propagate the species, because basically it's nature's way of saying, look, you've done your job, you've impregnated this one particular woman, it's now time for you to move on and impregnate other women, because this is the biological function of sex. And hence you'll find lots of men, while their wives are pregnant, would cheat on their wives. Not that the pregnant wife is unattractive, but that it's just a natural instinct to propagate the species, though not obviously rationally conceived of in that way. By most men, they just feel, they don't know why they feel that way. So, given that scenario, what we see is that if sex is the biological function of, or the biological necessity for the propagation of species, then technically a man can propagate the species more adequately by sleeping with multiple partners, right? Once the one woman falls pregnant, it's a full 9 months, and then sometime after that, if she breastfeeds, there's a less likelihood that she'll fall pregnant again soon thereafter, before she can bear another child. So technically, just in terms of biological function, there's no need for the man to be sleeping with that woman any longer until her body is again fertile and ready to produce another child. Therefore, it is a natural desire for some men in those scenarios to go and seek other mates, and in so doing they're fulfilling a natural biological function. Of course, these natural biological functions are regulated because of other significant considerations, but we are not yet talking about those things. We're not yet at that point. Where we are right now in our discussion is just understanding the biology of the polygynous tendency of a lot of men. And so technically, and years where you can literally notice the significant difference between men and women, is that technically a man can sire 50 or 60 or 100 children in 1 year, depending on how many women he sleeps with, whereas a woman can technically sire 1 or 2 or 3 if she has twins or triplets or quadruplets. She can sire, she can give birth to 2 or 3 or 4 children in 1 year. But obviously, for the most part, one child. Most women obviously carry one child at a time in their womb, and so they can only give birth to one child in a year, and then there's the period after the giving birth where women are not likely to fall pregnant again, at least not for if they are full-time breastfeeding mothers. And so in the biological scheme of things, men are therefore designed to be polygynous, biologically designed to be polygynous, and it explains why there is a higher likelihood of infidelity experienced, by men in societies. So men are more likely to stray from their monogamous marriages because they are technically biologically designed to be able to fertilize 100 or 200 women in 1 year. Literally, that's possible for a man to do. Because that's a biological possibility, it follows that demanding of this at least on a biological level, demanding that this creature, who is so designed to remain eternally loyal and sexually exclusive with one woman for his entire life, is ludicrous, quite frankly. It rarely happens. Yes, I'm not here to say or to look down on people who do it. I mean, kudos to you if you do it and if you are doing it. And I mean, it's quite amazing that you are able to do it. But also understand where we come from, from a biological perspective, and why demanding monogamy as a rule is, unrealistic. So by just considering this one biological fact, you know. There are many other things we will highlight in coming videos. What I do want to say is that polygyny, because it stems from the principle of marriage, essentially. There's a difference between a polygynous marriage and men sleeping around, okay? Because marriage, obviously, because it involves those three things that I mentioned, it comes with, obviously, significant input from both parties, the man and the woman, in terms of responsibilities that they have towards each other and towards the children. And so because of that, the level of responsibilities that people undertake when they have an actual marriage union, it is mostly unfeasible for even men who do practice polygyny to have large amounts of wives. So, responsible polygynous men who would have a number of wives that is equivalent to what they are able to manage or, be responsible for, basically. And so it will not be, insurmountable amount of wives because of rights, responsibilities that exist within the marriage union. So when I talk about polygyny, I'm not talking about men just sleeping around willy-nilly, but I'm talking about within the social contract of marriage, which we will discuss why that is important. But from the get-go, what I want you to realize is that all things considered, if we cut out the social contract of marriage, we cut out the other considerations and necessities of life outside of the biological reality, then men would ordinarily roam around and impregnate hundreds of women, if it is for those men that have that capability. That would be the natural order of the day, okay, from a biological perspective. Of course, there's not only the biological factors, there's the emotional and there is the spiritual, as well as the consequences of bringing children into the world and the rights of children, etc. So there are many things to consider. However, the point I'm driving home for this video, part 2 series of polygyny, is that demanding monogamy is unrealistic. Any system that prescribes responsible sexual relationships, i.e. marriage, where the consequences and results of that union are accepted, and where people behave in a way that is conducive for the furtherance of civilization. Any system that prescribes that and at the same time insists on monogamy is essentially an unfeasible, unrealistic system that would essentially destroy or self-destruct within itself. The system would self-destruct, basically. It would not work. And that's kind of what we see today, people turning their backs on marriage. It's largely that they're not really turning their backs on marriage as much as they are actually turning their back on institutional monogamy, because institutional monogamy has become, in the imaginations of many people, just simply unfeasible. And in the past, when people were more inclined towards upholding this concept of monogamy, it was usually through the coercion of society and the church. So, and whether these people who engaged in these monogamous marriages were actually monogamous is, a story for another day. If we could have collected data on how many people actually stray from their marriages, etc., it might just reveal a completely different picture. And that's what I'm saying is basically that enforced monogamy is an illusion of, gigantic proportions, and it has deceived many people, especially women, because it tends to lean towards fulfilling the expectations of women more so than of men. And so you will find that by and large, when coming to the discussion of polygyny, you will find that obviously women tend to have a greater problem with polygyny than men do, because men intrinsically understand that even men who never practice it, and men who are even men who you will find men who are actually averse to the idea of polygyny, it's usually out of their sympathy for women, and it's usually something to do with an ideological standpoint, and often it's a denial of their biological existence. So the human animal, in other words, is being denied when polygyny is sort of kicked out of the door. And so really what you have in the system of polygyny, to conclude, is that on the one hand you have human nature and biology, and on the other hand you have the consequences or the natural consequences of sexual relationships, which bring about various scenarios that could become tumultuous, that could negatively affect the progress of society. So sex willy-nilly, in other words, was never considered a good thing. So therefore, this biology of man and woman has to be regulated, and in so doing, the rules of marriage, of course in an organic way, has come about to regulate the sexual behavior of both male and female. However, these regulations cannot deny the biological realities of these genders, the male and the female gender, and therefore it is only natural that in the Abrahamic traditions, coming back to the Abrahamic faith, polygyny has always been practiced and has always been part of the religious sentiment and religious tradition of the prophets, and the biblical prophets, the Quranic prophets, and in general of Abrahamic monotheism. And so that's where I leave you. Again, just in summary, men can physically, biologically impregnate hundreds of women, 100, 200 women in a year. Women can only give birth to 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, maybe if they have quadruplets, can give birth to 4 kids, maybe maximum. Sometimes when women are on these fertility drugs, it can actually boost the possibility of having even more kids at one time. But normally, 1 to 4, within a year. Okay, so the biological spectrum of what is a male and what is a female it's like night and day. It's this wide basically, and so to confine or to expect both men and women to follow exactly the same rules as an ideological stance is unfeasible and unrealistic. Thank you very much.